I'm Natasha, and this is Yaks in the Stack. It's our podcast where we yak in the stacks.
Heck yeah. My name is Catherine O'Brien, and I work at the main library. I'm a youth programmer, so I do programs and I do outreach at the main library on the 4th floor.
And I'm Hayden, and I also work at the main library on the 4th floor doing youth programming, and it's a lot of fun.
So today we're talking about aliens is our theme this week. Our resident alien specialist is Natasha. Natasha does a lot about aliens. We talk about it a lot. And you always have cool stories. What do you think is the first thing that made you like aliens so much? What do you think brought your attention to them?
To be honest, probably the first thing that got me really into aliens as a kid. My favorite book series growing up was Animorphs, which is all about aliens. And it's kind of weird. It's a kind of weird series. I feel like a lot of people, my age maybe remember seeing the covers. They have these weird pictures of kids turning into animals on the front. Almost everyone I know is like, oh, those books scared me when I was a kid. They had scary covers, but they were actually really good. And they were about aliens. Since then, I've always just been really into aliens. And it's spread, very science fiction nerd kind of guy.
It's spread.
It's spread.
Speaking of the Animorphs series, I also dabbled in Animorphs when I was a kid. My favorite thing that I've ever read or seen about Animorphs was, I don't know where I was on Tumblr at the time, but I remember seeing something where they were like, do you ever think about in the future someone's going to find a random rogue Animorph book and think that humans in 10,000 years, they're going to be like the humans in 2020 or, freaking 1996 could morph into dogs.
I wish. That's how I'd like to be remembered, as a guy that could turn into a gorilla. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, they're going to put it on display somewhere. Like how we have the early humans. That's going to be their version of that. Homo sapiens and Earths.
They could do that.
Well, my first introduction to aliens was my dad, actually. My dad, when I was a kid, when I was growing up, we like to have these super in-depth conversations about space and time. And, I don't remember. There was this movie when I was a kid that was all these scientists, and they would talk about molecules and atoms and stuff like that. And all I remember is learning that atoms don't actually touch each other. So, it's all just vibration. You don't touch anything, really, because it's all just covered in atoms and nothing actually touches. Is that real? I don't really know. I'm not a scientist. I remember my dad would talk to me about that and be like, if you don't look at something, does it really still exist? And I think my dad might have just been doing some things recreationally because he was just talking to like an 11-year-old kid, like, it's not real. It was really cool. And he would talk to me about aliens and how he believed that aliens existed. And so I always did too. And so I'm really glad I was able to have that growing up to be like, it's real, it's possible, They weren't really scary. I was never really scared until I got older and saw movies.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was when I was little and reading those books. They didn't really scare me, even though the books kind of had some scary parts in it. But then I feel like I watched some documentary. I don't even know what it's called now. I watched some documentary on Discovery Channel about alien abductions once as a kid. And that's when I started being scared of aliens. I still like them, but I'm like, I can't imagine anything creepier than waking up in the middle of the night and seeing an alien in my room. That's peak horror to me.
I also started out mostly with Animorphs. I remember being really young and being like, these are the coolest books I've ever seen. And I went from Animorphs to X-Files. I watched it with my mom. We really liked Doctor Who. So we went from Animorphs, X-Files, and Doctor Who. And I think I was also really, really into Lilo and Stitch. That was probably even around the same time I read Animorphs. I was really into Lilo and Stitch. So aliens are kind of a hot topic for me. They've kind of been peppered all throughout the pop culture I've been enjoying my entire life.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about Lilo and Stitch. Oh my God.
Yeah, Lilo and Stitch was my favorite as a kid. I love Lilo and Stitch.
Dude, that unlocked I don't know why, I'm still very aware of Stitch, but it just was a core memory. Remember that TV show and that pink one?
Oh, the pink one. I always think about, which one was it? 326, the one who made sandwiches?
Oh, my.
I think it was 625.
625. There was a mini game on the website, the Disney website, where you stacked up the sandwich.
I spent hours on that exact mini game.
Just for the Gen Zs out there, you used to play games on the computer. You'd go to www.nickelodeon.com and you'd go, or was it Disney Channel?
It was Disney Channel.
Okay.
Nickelodeon had games too.
You'd go to disneychannel.com and you could play games. I'm pretty sure it still exists. You can go back in time.
There was this game I would play called SpongeBob SquarePants Flip or Flop, where you made burgers, and I was trying so hard to find that game the other day because I wanted to play it, and I was searching forever to find it. I couldn't find it up anywhere.
I want to talk about really quickly. I'm just going to jump in with my little thing that I like some research for this. I watched this movie with my dad called Fire in the Sky. So I thought it was called October Sky. Don't know why, but it's actually called Fire in the Sky. It came out in 1993. So it came out the same year I was born. Based on a true story of this guy. Let's see. This guy, his last name is Walton. Anyways, in the movie, it's like this group of loggers and they're out in this field doing their logging thing. They're not in a field. Why would loggers be in a field? They're in a It was a very realistic movie. No. They were in a forest and like they see this huge light come down, their stupid friend, like they're all running away, and then their friend is like, I want to see what it is. So he goes to the light and he gets zapped like a bug and then he goes missing. And so basically he has this horrific abduction situation, you guys. He gets abducted and there's this scene where this guy, it was made in 1993. So it's not gory necessarily, but it is hugely anxiety inducing for me. These aliens strap him down and then they take this drill and drill into his eyeball. But you don't see it. You see the drill, but you don't see the eyeball. It's really scary. He gets dragged down this long hallway. He's like getting dragged and his arms are like behind him. So he's getting drugged by his feet. His arms are behind him and he grabs something off the ground. It's a pair of eyeglasses because there's been like other people abducted. Anyways, meanwhile, while all this is happening, his friends go to town and they're like, my friend, this guy just disappeared, blah, blah, blah. And everyone thinks that they murdered him. But they did not. And they all take polygraph tests and pass it. They all pass the polygraph test. I think one is inconclusive, but everybody else passes or whatever. The guy shows up back 2 towns over, totally naked, in a phone booth or like at a phone booth or something. And he comes back and says, yeah, I was abducted by these aliens or whatever. He may be dead now, but to this day, he maintained his story for the rest of his life. And his friends were never arrested or charged with any harm to him or anything like that. It was just this crazy, bizarre thing. It was so crazy. It was a crazy movie. It was the first time, I think, that I was scared of aliens was watching that movie because it was so scary.
I think that's really interesting. It makes me think a lot about in that era, there was, I guess, kind of a spike of alien abduction reports in like the 50s to like the 90s. I feel like the 60s is when it really started to pick up. But you get a lot of these isolated stories of people who are respectable people who are lawyers or just otherwise pillars in their community who are like, this happened to me, who stick to their story the rest of their lives. They'll stick to it. And it's kind of interesting whether or not I believe that these people were actually abducted by aliens. I feel like something must have happened.
Yeah, because if it was all people who had previously had psychotic breaks or something like that, or like breaks with reality, or had delusions or something like that, you should still listen and hear what people say and take everything seriously. But then I can understand people being like, well, you know, Timmy down the street, he's had several delusions before. But these are like people who live very productive lives, normal lives. And then they're just one day like, yeah, I was abducted by aliens. They were tall and gray and weird looking.
That's the interesting thing to me, because I think a lot of these cases, the reason famous abduction cases become famous is because they can't be completely debunked. It'll be just normal people, and a lot of times adults, respectable adults, who just will have this happen to them and they never change their story, never deny it. And what do you say to somebody who's like, if you didn't believe in ghosts, for example, but then somebody comes to you and tells you their encounter with a ghost, like somebody you know and trust, you know, obviously something happened to them that rattled them up. So
yeah,
you know,
it's like,
it's hard not to believe when somebody talks to you like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you say that you love and trust someone, like a family member or a good friend or someone that you really know, and they're telling you that this happened, then you saying there's no way that could have happened to you is kind of like says something about you. If you're saying, well, I love and trust you and like I believe everything you've ever said, and I think you're like a decent, intelligent person that's well adjusted, you can't really coexist with those two things. You know what I mean? You just don't really have a choice. You kind of have to believe them if you're saying that you trust them and you're saying all these things about them. Because if you say you don't believe them, then you're kind of saying they're crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it's interesting in a lot of these abduction cases, regardless of what everyone else around believed, maybe in the newspaper, oh, so-and-so claims they got abducted. No matter what all the people who read it believe, oftentimes the person who experienced whatever they experienced, they very clearly, very strongly believe that this happened to them. Mm-hmm. So factually something has caused that belief. So that's where a little bit of real is peppered in there, regardless of how real the actual abduction may or may not be. They definitely believe that it happened, and that always interests me, and I want to find out, well, do they believe it happened because it did, or is it because some outlying other thing like you were talking about? That's one of the most interesting things to me, is the very real belief in these people that this definitely happened.
Right. And I mean, another thing Natasha and I have in common is sleep paralysis. And a lot of people who have experienced alien abduction or feel that they have experienced alien abduction also have experienced sleep paralysis. And that is a gnarly thing. It is no fun. Natasha, do you want to kind of talk about what sleep paralysis is?
Yeah, sleep paralysis definitely is pretty gnarly. It's a condition that happens. Basically, your body is still asleep and your brain is waking up. So you'll have this period of time when you're experiencing sleep paralysis where you're awake, but often you're not able to move or speak. And sometimes you'll have auditory or visual hallucinations as if you were dreaming, but since you're still waking up, it's kind of mixing with what's real and what's not. And a lot of those symptoms kind of coincide with what abduction victims claim to have experienced. You know, like they'll be in their room, they can't move, a creature enters the room, and then something happens. But when you're having sleep paralysis, oftentimes you wake up, you can't move, you might see something or hear something that's not really there. That goes away once you wake up all the way. But a lot of people who experience sleep paralysis, like that's a common explanation of abduction phenomenon, an episode of sleep paralysis.
I really find it so fascinating when that happens. Someone says, okay, I think I was abducted by aliens. And they're like, oh no, you just have sleep paralysis. And they're like, okay, but then what was this foreign object or foreign material they can find sometimes in their bodies? They'll find something in their arm that was implanted into their arm or something like that. That is some spooky stuff. Fun fact, there was a whole thing in the X-Files about that.
In the X-Files, there was the whole subplot where the women that were abducted, they'd come back with implants, but then when they removed the implants, they would start getting really sick. I don't remember exactly. It's been a long time since I've watched the X-Files.
That's basically it. Yeah, they would just get really sick and almost die. And I don't want to like spoil the X-Files for anybody. Scully's okay. You know,
she makes it.
I think it's also interesting, people who claim to be abducted, and then people are like, oh, well, you just have sleep paralysis. That's one thing, but sometimes people will turn up missing. And when they come back, they're like, well, I was with the aliens, and no one can find out where they've been. No one has seen them in days. That's different to me, because you can't just debunk that with, oh, it was sleep paralysis. It's okay. The person was gone, like gone. So it almost makes it more mysterious to me and more plausible, thinking, okay, well, they were just off the face of the planet for 3 days, and now they came back and they were like, yeah, I was with the aliens. We were chilling out up in space.
I feel like in a lot of these communities where you see stories like that, where could they have gone that no one would know where they were for a week or more? I feel like I read a story once of somebody, he wrote a whole book about it. I don't remember. He was gone for a long time and he came back. And of course, it could be maybe he had just walked out on his family or whatever and made up this elaborate lie so that he could come back and no one would be mad at him. But I mean, why? Why would you? What's the point? You know, it seems like a lot of work to just lie.
And surely someone else would have seen or heard some side of this person in the whole time they were gone.
Yeah, and if there was a police investigation, I feel like it's very hard for somebody to just disappear. And maybe it was easier in the 50s or the 60s or whatever when there was less record of people. But I feel like it's hard to go anywhere without talking to somebody. Get your money from the bank, get your car or whatever. I just think it's really hard to just vanish completely.
And you can't go somewhere and not leave some kind of evidence that you've been there. Like literally, if you went out into the woods and just lived out in the woods for 3 weeks and then came back and said, oh yeah, I was abducted by aliens for 3 weeks. If somebody was really going to look into that, they could find that you were out there. What are you going to just sit in the dark, sit on a rock for 3 weeks and do nothing?
Yeah, they're going to find you'd have had to eat. You'd have had to, poop. I didn't know another word for it. I was trying to think of a polite word. You'd have to make waste. But I mean, you would.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that it's one thing to want attention and it's another thing to tell somebody what happened to you and not be believed. I think that's crazy. I think it's crazy anytime someone tells you something happened to you and they don't believe you. That would really suck. It ties into a lot of other topics about listening to women and things like that. So we won't get into that.
That's another episode.
So tell me, because I have not seen the Alien franchise at all. So can you give me a really spoiler-free, somewhat overview of what I'm in store for?
Yeah, so the Alien franchise, it's not really about alien abductions or anything like that. It is about aliens, obviously. Actually, plot twist, there are no aliens in Alien. No, I'm kidding. That's not true. The whole concept of it is it's in the future, but how they thought the future might look in the late 70s. came out in 79. It's got a really cool aesthetic. I'm not going to get into that right now, but the idea is that the main cast of the first movie, they're the workers on this freighter ship. They're basically truckers going from one place to another. Their job is really mundane. It's not prestigious. Yeah, they're working in space and it's really cool, but at the same time, they're just regular people. And they work for this company, Weyland-Yutani, that has contracted them to do this. And the kind of hook for the story is they answer a distress signal on an uncharted world. And one thing leads to another, and the events of the movie occur. A large part of the movie is that due to them answering that distress call, an alien organism ends up on the ship with them. So it's really scary. It's very foundational for this futuristic dystopia genre, as well as horror, science fiction horror, stuff like that. It's just a really interesting sci-fi universe. I think a lot of the commentary in the movie, it's very applicable to a 2020 world, because a lot of it is very anti-corporate. Without spoilers, one of the big kind of driving points of the movie is how much does this company care about us and what are they willing to put us through to get what they want.
Not at all, and quite a lot.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting the way they use this science fiction world, these alien creatures, but they're still telling a very relevant, even today, even, 50 years later, this very relevant story about the world and about people living in it. It's very cool.
Are there any noteworthy actors that are still doing stuff today?
Sigourney Weaver is in a lot of stuff. She was in Avatar. She was in Finding Dory. I just remember Dory was talking to her like, Sigourney, I can do it.
She's like a voiceover at the, I don't know, it's not SeaWorld, but it's some kind of aquarium. And she's a voiceover and she's like, I'm Sigourney Weaver. Welcome to so-and-so, whatever. Yeah, I love it. That's so funny. Yeah, I haven't seen them. I need to watch them. We're watching through Jurassic Park movies right now, which is crazy. I mean, kind of. They're not aliens, but they're dinosaurs. They don't exist anymore. They look like aliens to me. I'm trying to think of other alien movies that I've seen that I just like, or alien topics. There was a movie my friend and I would watch when we were young teenagers that was really scary, and I didn't like it, but she always wanted to watch it, so I would. It took place in Alaska, and
Fourth Kind.
oh, I hated it.
Oh, it's so scary.
I hated it. It was the worst. She always wanted to watch it, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, I like scary movies, but I was like, this is so scary. It went into like a demonic way, and I didn't like it. Yeah. Have you ever heard of this, Hayden?
No. Well, if I've heard of it, it's been like, there's a movie I'm not going to watch.
I liked it all right. There were things about it that I didn't like, but overall, very creepy. It's like psychological horror movie. It's played like a documentary. The idea is they're interviewing this woman who went through all of this crazy alien stuff, all of these encounters and all of that. And it'll show footage from her office, quote unquote footage. And then side by side, they'll do a recreation of the footage. It's pretty cool because one of the big things in that movie, and this is actually a very common thing in people who study abductees, they'll do regression hypnosis therapy, which is not super accurate a lot of the time. It's really easy to kind of implant ideas in people's head. But the idea is through hypnosis, you can get people to talk about things that they've experienced that they don't remember, really.
Don't like that. I'm supposed to remember. I won't.
Exactly. So it's this idea that all these people have been having these weird experiences and missing time and all of this stuff. And regression hypnosis is supposed to walk them through what happened, those times they can't remember. But they all have these very strikingly similar stories of these encounters that they're having with otherworldly creatures. It just escalates and gets creepier and creepier.
I specifically remember this part where there was something about her husband had been killed. And an underlying story plot was she was kind of wanting to figure out what had happened. She thought that somebody had come in and murdered him in their bed. She was sleeping next to him and he was murdered next to her. And she was convinced that somebody had come in and just stabbed him in her bed, and she had freaked out and just never seen the person. But it turns out it wasn't that. It was something else. And I don't know. I'm ruining it for anyone who wants to watch it, but I was so scared. And then there's this part where she records herself sleeping, records a tape recorder herself sleeping. And there's all this, maybe it was sleeping, maybe it wasn't sleeping. Maybe she was in hypnosis when she recorded it. I don't remember. But there's a part where she listens to herself and she's screaming, blood curdling. She's basically hearing herself being abducted.
She can't remember it.
So she looks down at the floor and there's scratch marks on the floor. And she's realizing that I was abducted last night and I don't remember.
Ooh.
It's so creepy. I think the creepiest thing to me, since we're going ahead and spoiling it, was there's this whole underlying thing with all of the different people the abductees they'll interview where at a certain point during the hypnosis, when they remember what happened, they just go crazy. They go berserk. They have a psychological breakdown. And the thing that always happens is they'll talk about seeing an owl in their room. And then the thing that gets them when the guy is like, you have to look at the owl, tell me about the owl. They'll say, it's not an owl. And then that's when they like break down. I'm like, it's scary. Like it's something about that. Oh, there's this owl in my window watching me.
Oh, but it's not the thing. And you're just like,
yeah.
What?
And I just distinctly remember there was one part where one of the people says the owl is looking at me and the owl is smiling. And like that creeped me out. Like that creeped me out so much. It's a good movie.
Scary. They should not be allowed to make them that scary.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I feel like alien abduction, as I said before, very, very scary concept. The idea of waking up and there's an alien in my room, terrifying. Being in a situation I can't control or understand, terrifying. But there's a very few movies about alien abduction, just in general. And the ones that I've seen, most of them aren't that scary. Like, a lot of them are kind of lame.
Signs. That's not really about abduction. That's more so about invasion. But that one was not very scary. Even the actual alien being from that one was lame.
One that I really liked about alien abduction, I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called Dark Skies. I can't remember who was in it. Well, J.K. Simmons was in it.
He's my favorite. Oh my God.
He was Edwin Pollard, but I don't remember what character that was. Actually, I think I do. I think it was the old guy. Anyway, this was a pretty cool movie. I think that did alien abduction pretty well. The whole thing is this family of four, the parents and the two sons, they just moved into this new neighborhood and they're having all this stuff kind of happen to them. And as it goes, you're realizing that the youngest of the two kids is being abducted by aliens. And all of this weird stuff just starts happening to them in their neighborhood. And it's just really interesting. I think aliens are a really cool tool in fiction to explore humanity, which sounds very pretentious, but it's true. When you present this idea of something that we can't understand or that's just so different from humans, it really puts a focus on human behavior and human interaction and all of that. And I feel like this movie kind of did a good job of doing that because part of the plot is that the aliens, as they're abducting, tormenting this family, basically, they're like slowly isolating them, you know? So they feel like there's no one they can talk to and no one they can interact with, and it's just them. And it's a pretty good movie. I do recommend it if alien abductions are kind of creepy to you. It came out in 2013.
It sounds like a metaphor for mental health or mental illness. Slowly isolates them and makes them feel like no one can help them. That's crazy.
The idea of the alien using that against you, using your own psychology against you, that's cool.
Yeah, it really is. And I think I really like the idea of thinking about it in terms of a representation of the times, kind of using that, like you said it so well, using it in fiction to mirror what's going on. I think that's really possible because in the past I've looked into the Twilight Zone, like I did a podcast dealing with the Twilight Zone, and we looked into how human behavior changes when put under certain stressors or when you're dealing with pure fear. What happens to like humans? How do they react? Stuff like that. Are humans inherently good or inherently bad? And aliens do a really good job of doing that too in fiction or in media, of being like, how are you going to react? How is human behavior tied up in emotion and the ability to understand and the ability to be understanding, I guess? How willing are humans to accept, not even accept the aliens as a species come to Earth, accepting their inability to understand?
I think that even media that's not scary with aliens does a good job of that. Animorphs, bring it back to Animorphs, that's like a big part of it. There's different species that they have to learn how to understand. Why do you act like this? We have to be able to work together, so we have to be able to understand that. And to understand something else that's just totally foreign, you have to be able to understand yourself.
I think that's really interesting. You're acceptant of things that are different and like different views and ideas and beliefs and just actual realities, different realities to yours. Aliens are a really good boat. No, they're a good catalyst for that, I guess.
Good boat.
It's a good boat.
That's good. That's just what we should call it. It's a good boat, like a good vessel.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I think a lot of media with aliens kind of presents it as us looking at these aliens and us being like, from a human perspective, we're all looking like, oh, these are these weird creatures and they don't understand us and we need to make them understand us. But there's the occasional piece of media that will let you look at Earth through the aliens' perspective. And I love it because there's a lot of different ways you can take that. You can take it and say these aliens think that Earth is beautiful and the humans are beautiful and look at how they react to these things differently and look at all this life. Or you could Invader Zim it and be like, fast food is gross and humans are gross and everything is gross and this is awful. I think it's interesting
to destroy this inferior place because it's so
Yeah.
disgusting and weird. That's really fun too. Because that's another thing, back to Animorphs, another thing that they do a lot, because one of the main characters is an alien and he's living in disguise on Earth. And as part of his experience is just being completely foreign. Not even like I'm from another country, like I'm literally from another planet and I have no understanding of how your culture is supposed to work or how things are supposed to work. And that's always kind of an interesting view, an interesting way to talk about the world, you know, and the state of it and people and all that, kind of from the point of view of someone who's literally not from here.
I think it's really interesting. Something that I've been doing in my personal life is when someone says something to me that is inherently not good or it's hateful or something like that, I've decided that I'm just going to start pretending like I don't understand and like asking them to explain it to me in a more precise way. So if someone says something hateful, I'm like, what do you mean? I don't understand what define that word for me.
Like, why is that joke funny? Can you explain it to me?
Yes. And as a woman, that's easy for me to do, unfortunately. But it made me think of that whenever you were describing that character, because what's more retrospective than to have to be like, well, we don't let people come into our country because of all these reasons. And you have to sit there and map it out to someone who doesn't have any of these preconceived notions that you have, that you can make yourself feel like what you're saying is okay. So that's so interesting. I think that that whole storyline of like somebody who's totally unaware of everything is so good because it's such a huge mirror.
Or things that are bad, but at the same time, things that are good. My favorite video game series is Mass Effect. It's about aliens. Well, it's not. It is about aliens. There's a lot of different aliens in it. And one of the kind of subplots is these humans that are new to this intergalactic community. And people are really wary of them because they're really smart and they have a lot of ingenuity and they have a lot of passion and drive to like do things. And they set a goal on something and they'll just work endlessly to that goal. And so like that's intimidating to a lot of the other species. It's a good thing that humans are like that.
Yeah.
These exemplified traits that are good. And at the same time, there are bad things that the other aliens don't like about humans that are also true of humans. But it's kind of interesting to see the good things about humans being put on display and something that people are concerned about or interested in. It's a double-edged sword, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think that's really interesting. That makes me think of, weirdly, this is not alien related, but related to the idea of a species or a supernatural creature not understanding why humans do the things they do. So Supernatural, the TV show, don't judge me, just stay with me. So there's like aliens and demons in that show. Or not aliens, angels. There's angels, and the angels are like, humans are trash, they're garbage, they're just bad, there's worms on the earth, nobody cares about the humans. But then there's a few angels who are like, humans are really good, they try really hard. They just try even though everything sucks all the time. And so that's what that makes me think of. It is a double-edged sword with aliens specifically because they can see all the crappy things that humans do, but they can also be like, but you get up out of bed every day. Good for you! You know?
It's really cool. Like, you guys have these ideals or this, whatever. One of the things in Mass Effect is humans are really individualistic, a lot more so than other species. It's just something that is confusing to other species. Why do you care so much about the individual? Or why do you, stuff like that is really interesting.
Yeah, aliens are a good catalyst for that. They're a good mind boat.
They're a good mind boat.
I think that it's really interesting, aliens being the topic. We tend to go into it talking about aliens, but we wind up at the end really talking about what it means to be human, which I just think is really, really super cool.
Exactly. It's such a good mind boat for thinking about humanity.
Yes!
It's a very human thing to do, too. How
yeah.
To just be like, yeah, aliens, but me. Like,
yeah, I think everyone, or at least I think everybody, likes to understand things by comparing them to themselves. Because I know I do. That's why a lot of the time I'll be talking to someone and they're saying, and I'll be like, oh, this is just like that one time this happened to me. You relate to somebody by comparing their experiences to yourself. So I think that's why aliens are such a good mind boat for this kind of thought exercise and conversation exercise, because it's hard to compare something like that to yourself, something that's so fundamentally different from yourself.
Something that you don't know anything about. We don't have any good idea about what an alien would be like or look like or think. So it's a completely open field of study. Like anything you could possibly imagine could be true for all we know.
You're right. And I think that's why it's interesting. I feel like a lot of media I've consumed that's about aliens on a larger scale, like Mass Effect or Animorphs or all of this, like such an underlying plot, is it really puts into perspective how humans aren't so different from one another. This thing is so different from us. that's hard to comprehend. Like in Arrival. Did you guys ever see Arrival?
I'm real out of the loop.
Arrival was a really cool movie. It was about aliens. It was actually very interesting. I really recommend it. All these different alien ships landed all across the world, and the main character is a linguist, and the aliens have a written text that they'll go up into their little alien pod and they'll write words on the wall, and nobody can read the text. So it's like all these different linguists from all these different countries are going up into these pods trying to understand, because it's all the same message. The aliens are giving all the same message to all these people, and they're trying to figure out what it is that the aliens are trying to say. And it's really kind of this fascinating look into language, something I've never thought would be a subject of like a movie, and also just how we go about different people from different cultures, from different backgrounds doing this, but they all have the same goal, and they all have to work together to be able to understand what's going on at the end of the day when facing something that you just can't understand, or something that's just so different from you. Why fight with the other human next to you when you could work together to understand it? So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right with the whole idea of suddenly borders aren't really a thing anymore whenever you have something that's literally off planet to deal with. Like, okay, you're right. Australia's really not that far away when you're talking about the sun. It makes me think of the golden plate thing that we sent out into space, but we sent it out there a long time ago. That famous guy.
The one on the moon?
I don't think it's on the moon. I think it's still traveling.
They sent it out in like the 70s, and it's just like a radio signal that just goes out that has information about humans and the planet and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's the Voyager Golden Record.
Oh, yeah.
And it has Carl Sagan is the guy I was talking about, the famous guy. Carl Sagan, he said these spacecraft will be encountered and the record played only if there are advanced spacefaring civilizations in interstellar space. But the launching of this bottle into the cosmic ocean says something very hopeful about life on this planet. And it has math equations on it. If you play the record, it has the sounds of the wind on it. It has music on it. It has all kinds of stuff on it. And it has instructions. It has like a player. And on the record, it has instructions about how to assemble the player and how to play the record. And it also, I believe, either that one or the next one that was sent out, because there's another one that was sent out after, has coordinate to Earth, which is kind of terrifying. But that language thing is what made me think that, because there's like arrows on the record to represent movement or direction. And a lot of people have said, how could we even begin to understand how an alien species would use language? Or if they've never done any hunting, if they've never had any reason to do hunting, then they might not associate an arrow shape to mean direction, because like they would have never thrown an arrow or anything like that. How could we even begin to know what they might know? It's an interesting thing for anybody listening who hasn't looked into the Voyager Golden Record. Definitely look it up. It says, although neither Voyager spacecraft is headed towards any particular star, Voyager 1 will pass within 1.6 light years distance of the star Gliese 445, currently in the constellation, I can't say that word, and it'll do that in about 40,000 years.
Might be a while before we hear back.
None of us will be around, but you know, it's not gonna like even leave our galaxy for like a long, long time.
This makes me think of this thing in the 70s, the SETI dish, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's this program that uses all of these different resources to scan stuff and send out radio waves and all that to try to communicate with possible extraterrestrial life. In the 70s, one time, the Big Ear radio telescope, the big giant SETI dish in Ohio, was scanning, and this guy found
Space sounds.
There was a transmission, a 72-second transmission that, for all intents and purposes, seemed like it had been sent. Like it seemed to be abnormal. It was not a natural thing. Like it was a manufactured thing, radio wave.
They had been listening for a really long time and never heard anything like that.
This was actually in X-Files. The WoW signal was mentioned in X-Files too. They'd never heard anything like that before, and they'd never heard anything like that again. Even still, it's pretty much the strongest evidence that's ever existed that there's intelligent, advanced life on other planets, like this one stray radio signal that we caught on accident that was so perfect. And that's just really interesting to me, because it makes me think, how come we haven't found it again?
I don't know. I think it's possible. My theory, I have two theories. Here's my 2 theories about what's going on with that and why we haven't heard anything. So my first theory is that it's a big, big world. It's a big, big known universe. I think it could be possible that either something has advanced so much, and it's also been around for such a super crazy long time, that we've come after something and there's still some kind of residual energy or radio waves or something banging around the universe, and there really isn't a lot out there, and we just, I don't know. Or my second theory is that Earth's a really messed up place, and if there was something out there that was like highly intelligent enough to find us, then the whole idea of, well, they might come to Earth for the water. Those guys aren't in need of anything. If they're already out there hopping around planets and stuff like that, they're not like, we want your water. They've already got it under control. They can create water in the lab, okay?
Yeah, they just put the molecules together.
They're not worried about water. They don't want to come here because we can't even take care of our own people. They're like, we don't want to go to Earth. But those are my 2 theories.
The aliens were like, social distance, guys.
Yeah, stay
Don't go
6
to Earth.
parsecs apart.
Yeah, they're like, y'all can't even wear masks properly. We don't want you on our spaceships, okay? We've seen Delta Airlines, all right?
We know what you guys think sanitary is. It makes me think there's this thing, it's called the Fermi Paradox, and it's basically what we just were talking about. It's just this idea that the Milky Way is huge. There's so many stars. Like when you think of Earth, and there's the sun, which is like the perfect age and size, and then Earth, the perfect distance away from the sun to support life and plant growth and cell life and eventually complex life, blah, blah, blah. There's a billion, million, trillion stars exactly like our sun in Milky Way universe. There's probably a billion, million, trillion planets in the perfect Goldilocks distance from that sun, those suns. Some of those suns are much older than our sun, and if hypothetically life developed at the same rate on all those planets, they should by now have intelligent life, at least at our level. All of these kind of ideas that there's all of these possibilities, and yet still to this day, there's been no concrete convincing evidence that life on other planets exists. That's just kind of this big
question mark,
this big point of debate within extraterrestrial conversations and all of that. And all of these reasons you can find on the Wikipedia page for the Fermi Paradox. There's all of these different hypothetical explanations. Why is it we haven't been contacted or been able to find anybody? And it's kind of interesting just looking, without even reading the descriptions, looking at the names. There's things like lack of desire to live on other planets. What you said, if they have all of this power, why would they want to come to Earth? One is like they're too alien. We just don't understand. Maybe we've been sending them radio waves. Maybe they've been sending us radio waves the whole time. We just can't. They're just too alien for us to understand. There's stuff like Earth is deliberately being not contacted. Earth is being purposely isolated, or it's dangerous to communicate, or stuff like that. That kind of makes me feel a little scared.
Get really conspiracy theorist with it and be like, maybe we are being contacted and it's being kept from the regular people. Like maybe the government is in contact, with aliens and they're just not telling us.
I mean, and that's why in the 50s, 60s, the Cold War era, all of these alien abduction theories, they started because that was the idea that there was deals with the government, and the governments of all these different countries were letting aliens abduct their citizens in exchange for alien technology. That was like a huge conspiracy at the time. I feel like that was in X-Files too. I feel like that was a subplot. X-Files was a very well-researched show. It had a lot of really fun alien abduction lore tidbits in it.
I mean, I just wish that if the government was going to do that, they would just ask us. For example, I got an email recently where they were like, do you want to take part in the COVID-19 vaccine study? And I have some health conditions as to why I can't do that. But if they sent me an email and they were like, the aliens really want to test your kidneys, could you just give me a stipend?
In a heartbeat, I'd be like, sure. First, are you going to pay me? Because it's going to be like one of those experiments where you get paid if it's aliens knocking at my door. You can afford it. Yeah.
I just wish they would ask, because I feel like a lot of people would sign up for it. Do you know how dumb humans are? I feel like a lot of people would be like, heck yeah.
Also, not just dumb, but curious. I feel like if the government just was like, hey, on the news, here are the aliens. They're here. They want to study a few people. You'll go live with them for a few years, and then you'll come back, and it'll be fine. I bet there'd be a wait list. I bet there'd be a wait list a mile long to go live with the aliens for a year and have them study you and all that stuff.
I can see the TikToks already. Inline aliens.
Me with my new roommate, Glart.
Somebody posted at some point, hey guys, did anybody notice that everything was cool until we raided Area 51?
Yep.
Oh, no.
The aliens got out. They just started ruining.
If you had to answer in a black and white yes or no, do you believe in aliens? With no context, would your answer be yes or no?
Absolutely yes.
Yes.
I also say yes, so it's unanimous.
If you had to answer no context, yes or no, black and white, do you think aliens have been to Earth?
Yes.
Yes.
I gotta say no. I don't actually believe it. As much as I love aliens and believe that they're real, I don't get why they would come and just take people. To what end? And maybe that's just part of them being too alien for me to understand, but to what end?
I mean, I am kind of a conspiracy theorist myself, but I would go so far as to say not only have they been to Earth, but if I'm going to say they're real, yes, and I'm going to say yes, they've been to Earth, I would continue that and say there probably are some on Earth at this exact moment.
Yeah, real crazy. Like, it's really exposing how we really feel here. I also think they would come here. The reason being because I do believe that they would have to be a lot more intelligent than we are, which wouldn't really be hard, let's be honest. But I think that they would be like way more advanced than us. And I think that they could come and go as they please. And I tend to think of aliens in a way that if they were advanced enough to get here, this whole theory that I have is not counting aliens that come in asteroids that crashed Earth and maybe it's like bacteria and stuff. Yes, technically those are aliens. But what I'm talking about is more of like a spiritual being, which is insane and I know crazy, but I'm thinking of them in like a higher plane of intelligence.
Extra dimensional. It's an extra dimensional being, right?
They can come and go kind of as they please. And everyone's like, well, don't you think they would hurt us or cause harm to Earth or whatever? And I'm like, why would they want to? They can do whatever they want to do. I don't understand. It would just harm us for harm's sake. I don't understand. They would just probably come and be like, this is lame, and then leave.
You know, it actually makes me think if you were a fish in the ocean with a rare genetic mutation, but you didn't know that, and you're just a fish, you're just swimming around. And then one day, a human scientist sees you and is like, that's a cool fish, and picks you up and takes you out of the water and brings you to their lab and takes some of your blood and looks at you and pokes you and prods you, and then they decide they're done and they put you back in the ocean. Well, that's a lot like an alien abduction right there.
Yeah.
So like aliens could just be so intelligent that they view us like animals. So when they pick us up and take people and do experiments on them, it's not to them something, to us it's really scary, but to them it's just, it's just a Tuesday. I'm just taking the fish out of the ocean and looking at it for a little while before I put it back, stuff like that. It's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I definitely tend to think of them being highly, highly intelligent and way more advanced than us. So they can just be like, popping into Earth for a second, hon, and then they go, I have smallpox now.
Let me just step into my eradicate all disease machine.
Yeah. Or maybe like alien families are like, we're going to go visit Hong Kong. Maybe it's like a tourist thing. Like you got to get some vaccines and stuff before you go certain places. Got to drink my emergency. I'm getting on the transporter.
If I was an alien and somebody was like, well, Bob, where do you think you'll go on vacation next year? And then the other alien would be like, I was thinking about Earth. And then he would be like, oh, you don't want to go to Earth. They've got the COVID right now.
Yeah.
Maybe the aliens are the one that gave us the COVID.
Maybe. Oh my God.
They're probably like, okay, guys, no one's traveling to Earth. Maybe our tourism is actually not good because of all the aliens that aren't coming here right now.
We're all sick and fighting and crazy right now because the aliens don't want to show up. They're like, Earth was so fun back in the 60s when everyone was doing drugs and crazy. Why can't you guys go back to being funny?
So what I'm hearing is that we need to build an alien amusement park specifically for them and then just wait. We just need to sit on it and just wait and be like, look, we're super cool. We come to Earth. It's super awesome. And then just leave it there.
What would you say if an alien were to watch this podcast? What would you want to say to them? Like a quick 30-second elevator pitch.
For Earth. Not as bad as it seems.
Yeah.
Maybe the people aren't always great, but we've got some really pretty forests, some really cool mountains. The scenery is awesome. So check that out. Not as bad as it seems.
I think I would say humans are all so vastly different that you could meet 1,000 of us and not even come close to meeting every kind of person that there is. And our climate on Earth is so vastly different. You can go to places that are burning up and places that are freezing. And you could probably spend a lifetime here and never experience all of it. So don't judge us based on one or two things that you see because it's so unique and changes from place to place and time to time so much. That was long, though.
Your pitch was way better than mine.
Oh my God, put that on a plaque. Like, Ads for Earth by Hayden.
I really like humans sometimes.
That's fair.
Okay, so I would say that we have dogs. And I'm not sure that you guys have dogs, but we do. And they're floofy and nice. And they have ears.
I want that on a t-shirt.
I don't know if you guys have dogs, but we do. They have ears. That's the important part.
Yes.
Okay, so there's the dogs. And also, we have libraries and food is good. Do you guys have food? because like we have food, we got fried food and like cheese.
Eat this sour Skittle. Tell me what you think. Like,
Tell me that you have those, because yeah. And I would also just be like, can I take you to the mall? Like, I want you to experience the things that are innately human. You need to go through and experience middle school.
imagine, okay, kids, we got an exchange student, and the camera pans over, and it's like all these middle schoolers, and then a 6-foot tall gray alien walks in, and he's like sitting down, but his knees go so high because it's like a chair for a child.
Yeah, that would be my big thing. Is I would be like, I want you to experience things that are innately human, like jumping on a trampoline and eating a sour Skittle and going to middle school. Yeah, brain freeze, sneezing. So yeah, I think that would be my 30-second pitch. All right, well, I think that wraps up our first episode of Yaks and the Stacks about aliens.
We did yak a lot about aliens.
We did.
So check back next week for a new episode.